You're listening to the Strategically Podcast. I'm Tyler Collins.
And I'm Brandon Collins. As we like to say, strategy is all about finding the best way to get from where you are to where you want to be.
Head over to our website, Strategically, that's strategic.li, for more tools and content.
But right now, you can join us for this casual conversation where we dive deep into the concepts behind thinking strategically in life, business, or whatever you care about.
All right, so you asked me a question like 20 minutes ago.
Do you want to dive into, okay, why would you choose a lower or higher level of success, and is there any moral or ethical realities baked into that? Where do you want to start on that conversation? Like the most interesting question to me is, why would you ever choose a small level of success? Because I feel like that's very counterintuitive.
Yeah, so we can jump into that. First, well, I should probably just answer your question because you keep asking me, so I should probably just answer your question. So I think first I want to bring up this idea of 10,000 hours because I've seen it a lot of places, and I actually read the book, and I'm going to have to remember. I don't remember what the name of the book is, and we really, really need to look that up. But this book was written by the professor who actually did the study that came out with that 10,000 hours number that everybody uses. And I do mean everybody. If you have seen any self-help person / YouTuber / content maker in the last 10 years, they've referenced the idea of being an expert means 10,000 hours in something. First, I want to say that's not true. Okay, so I want to just get that out of the way. That is not even what the study was saying. I just want to briefly summarize what they were saying and how that number got conflated, just because I think it's hurting a lot of people. I don't know how else to say it. But so what they did is they studied violinists, and they ranked them in different rankings from, master. They had a couple of different, I forget all what the terms were, but they had different terms. And how many hours, the other thing they asked was, how many hours did it take you to get to that ranking? How many hours of practice, how many hours of study, et cetera, playing. They summed it and they put it all together. And the average was 10,000 across all of the people that they, sort of talked to. Mm-hmm. So you have on one end, maybe people who are masters and they were 12,000. And then maybe on the other end, you have people who were in the 8,000s and the average was 10,000. So some people took that and ran with it and said, well, if the average is 10,000 and all these people were like amazing, musicians, then it must be 10,000 hours everywhere. And I think you can see by now me telling the story why that's not the case, and that doesn't make any sense already. So
I think, is it Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell?
Yes,
is that the book?
No, I don't think it is actually.
Oh, okay. Because when I Googled it, that's what came up the most. Yeah. But okay.
That Malcolm actually was the one who referenced it, and I don't think I've actually read that book, but what I've heard is that he didn't reference it correctly, and he was the one that actually perpetuated this myth that it's got to be 10,000 hours, and he referenced this study, and so this guy, the guy who actually did the study, wrote this book, so it wasn't him. I know that for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he was in this book correcting that and being like, I wish he had never written it because now everybody brings it up and it's really not accurate. So for one thing, you can see that study only looked at violinists. It didn't look at other, professions. So like if you really want to know the answer, this is like a long way around, but I promise you I'm getting to answer the question, okay? This is important though. So they only looked at violinists. If you really wanted to see what is the average number of hours takes to master anything, you would have to look at dozens of industries, right? Mm-hmm. You'd have to look at golfers, things outside of sports, right? You'd have to look at like engineers. You'd have to look at lots of different kinds of work, kinds of jobs.
Chess masters.
Exactly. And you would probably notice that in any given industry, that number is probably vastly different. Even probably in the musician industry, like playing piano versus playing violin. Because I imagine, I'm not, I've never played violin, but I imagine that playing violin takes more skill and practice maybe than to become a professional in piano does, or guitar. You know what I'm saying? How many guitarists are in bands who have like 1,000 hours of practice, or even less, a couple hundred, and their band got big for whatever reason. Singers, right? Like singing is mostly talent. Definitely there's practice that's involved, but it's mostly talent. And do you have natural quality to your voice? So probably there'd be another one where it's a lot less time from getting to a professional level. Or, some people even say they compare singers. And I don't know if you ever watched any of those YouTube videos. I always laugh where they play them on their album and then they play them in real life. And you're like, it's hurting me. Mm-hmm. And what's interesting about those videos is some of the ones that you hear and they're not that great have just massive, massive numbers of success and financial success. And it has less to do with their talent and how great of a singer they are necessarily, although sometimes it does. Okay, so why am I saying all of this? I think that there's an assumption that we have to have that 10,000 hours. We have to have this this grind. We have to have this get up, do it every day, be the best in the world at it. That's the only way to succeed. And I understand why. I really do, because success is hard. It's definitely not easy. And it is about discipline. It is about habits, but I don't think it's all about putting this like number in. Oh, I got my number, therefore I've arrived. And that's sort of, I think, the false equivalency that people do. Like, I need to have X number of hours, then I've arrived, then I've become this thing. And I think the reason I bring all that up is to say that there are like lots of levels of success baked in two areas, and we've kind of touched on this already. And again, going back to your destination, like just thinking about that a little bit more, your level of success is going to take a certain amount of effort, a certain amount of energy, a certain amount of time, sacrifice, absolutely. And we've talked about these things when we talked about determining your destination. Mm-hmm. And for you might not want to sacrifice all of that. You might not want to give up all that time. You might want to be a novelist, but you just want to write trashy romance novels, and that doesn't take as much time and energy as it does to write the next great American novel. And you know what I mean? Rewrite it 5 times before you get it perfect. And now I wrote it. And the trashy romance novelist, like, I'm not maligning that at all. I'm just saying, like, they might actually make more money than the person who's like, I want to write the next great American novel. And you can see, like, in between that there's different levels of success in there. And that a lot of it really does line up with who you are, how far do you want to push? What do you want to, what are you willing to sacrifice? So like for me, I'm not willing to sacrifice my family. I'm not willing to give up time with my kids to be the best in the world at anything. That is not a thing that's going to happen. So I already know that there are certain levels of success that I will never get to because of that. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Like you hear, especially like these big entrepreneurial type companies that have exploded, and you hear them tell their story about when basically they lived at the office, or they, or even like the other one that comes to my mind is like the medical field sometimes, or lawyers, like that kind of a field where it's like it's all about putting the extra time and hours in, and if you don't, you're not going to succeed. And so then,
that is a reality. It's a reality.
Right. And so then you'd be wise to count that cost, I think is what you're saying, right?
Exactly.
You'd be wise to think, do I want that even before you begin? I think that's a great point. And I think that really demonstrates why it's better to do that on the front end. Because what if you get into it and you're like 5 years into your law degree, or not your degree, but your law practice at some firm, and they're like pushing you for more and more hours, and you're like, man, I don't want this, but I'm not going to get promoted otherwise. Like now that's a much tougher position than if you knew that coming in,
Yeah. So that's part of what I'm saying. Absolutely. And I think the other part of what I'm saying is that there's a lot of levels of success in the lower, levels. Like if success has numbers, like 1 through 10, and all 10 levels are what someone from the outside might call success. There's a lot of levels in the lower end that people don't shoot for because of like what we've been told. It's got to be 10,000 hours. I need to be the best in the world. I need to crush the competition. That's another thing too that I want to hit on, is that I think levels of success oftentimes, and we've kind of been hitting this already, but the anchoring effect, that so much of that is we're comparing it to other people and what they're doing. And I think that actually it's better to only compare it to what you're doing. That tends to be better for you, for your life, for your happiness. Because I think too, that's the other thing that we're missing, is that there's actually another level to this that's even higher, or maybe lower, depending on how you look at it. And that is like, why am I doing this? Well, I'm doing it because I want to be happy, right? because I think that if I get that job at Google, that will,
Yes.
I'll love it. Right.
And I think what you're with that, and I was literally about to say that same thing, because you said it very well. It's because of what we've been told.
Yeah.
We have been told there is a default answer.
Yes.
And the default answer will always be, well, I shouldn't say always, but will most likely be like, work your butt off, do the best, be the best. Like, oh, you were never that good. You were never that successful. When in reality, the default answer is not your answer. Like, you need your answer, like the why that you are doing it. And one person, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. I don't want to get there, but I think that phrase really caught my attention when you said it. What we've been told, like, is college graduation for you, or is that just what you've been told?
Yeah.
Is that promotion really what you want, or is that just the next thing and you just assume the next thing is what you want? Like, fill in the blank.
Well, and here's another reason why. Is because it's sometimes it's not even just what we've been told, it's the stories we hear, okay? And what I mean by that is the stories you hear is not, I go back to the NBA, but I don't know how. What if you're in the NBA and you're an all-star for 2 years and that's your career? That's still a great career. Not that many people are an all-star, but nobody is going to talk about you in the annals of NBA basketball history.
That is a great point. That is an excellent point.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes, because the stories, the thing, I forget. There's another bias for this. There's another phrase for it. It's not coming to me, but there's a phenomena in human psychology where when you hear about something a lot, you assume that's how the world is.
Yeah.
So the best example is winning the lottery. The reason that people think it's possible is because you always hear so and so won 20 million or 50 million. You do not hear ever this person lost the lottery. This person bought a lottery ticket and did not win. Because if you heard every one of those stories, that's all you would hear all day, every day. So the stories you hear become you start assuming that is reality.
Yes.
And so that's a great point about the stories you hear. You hear about the entrepreneur. That's who they're doing the expose on.
Yes.
That's who they're doing the featured, interview with.
Exactly.
Or the NBA, commentators. They're talking about the guys who are in the running to be the best in the world. They're not talking about the role player who loves his job, loves his family, makes millions of dollars, or, fill in the blank. That's a great point. That is really, really solid. I don't know why that's never occurred to me. And I think I've always thought it was more the society telling you, oh, this is success. But I think it's not maybe that sinister. It's also just what we talk about. We talk about interesting things, you know?
And you know what got me thinking about this? This is going to nerd me out a little bit. But I'm going to go there.
Because that never happens.
Is the huge wave that I've seen recently of speed records, speed runs in video games. And I got to thinking about that because when you think about it on the surface, it's just a weird thing. Like, why, first of all, why do people play the same game for 1,000 hours at least just to shave a couple of seconds off of a record time? And it gets crazier. Why am I watching them do it?
So hold on. So if you
why
don't know
am I spending my time watching them do it?
If you don't know what speedrunning is, let me give you a 10-second.
Good idea.
Take a game like Super Mario. Everybody knows Super Mario. And maybe the way it was designed to be played, it would take you 2 hours to beat. But because people have gotten so skilled and they have found all the perfect little glitches and all the like tricks of the levels, they can beat it in, say, 20 minutes. I don't know if those times are accurate, but you watch them play and they have to jump at just the right moment. They have to push the button within a split second of timing, and they have to do all of that and string a perfect run together in order to beat that second. So it takes hours, hundreds and thousands of hours of practice, and it takes trial and error and all that. So that's what we're talking about. Yeah.
And so anyway, I got to thinking about that, and I thought, there is a point of, I don't know if it's human nature, if it's just our culture. I that's sort of where my mind goes, is maybe it's just our culture. But that people care so much about that, I think shows that we just have this assumption. And I do think it goes back to the stories we hear of, well, that's a new record. It's a new world record. And how important, how much effort, emphasis we place on that. And video games, actually, speedrunning is an interesting example of that, because how are you going to say that the person who just beat it in 2 hours like it's intended didn't have just as much fun, if not more fun, than the speedrunner who spent thousands of hours to beat it in 10 minutes and get the world record, right?
Yeah, like there's a joy that comes, certainly there's a joy that comes from being the record holder.
Yeah.
But you could get, just as much maybe joy.
And, I don't want to take away from speedrunners, because I think that most speedrunners, if you are actually willing to spend that much time to get a world record in a game, you must like it. Maybe you're doing it for the attention. That's why you like it. Maybe you're doing it because you really love that game so much that you'll play it over and over again. I don't know why. Honestly, I'm not done speedrunning enough to know what the appeal is. Why do I watch it? I don't know.
Well, it's a different thing, right? At that point, it's not about the joy. It's about the performance. It's about the
that's true.
Beating everyone. Yeah. But I think what you're saying is great, because that becomes the anchoring effect then. The stories you hear become the new anchoring effect.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're like, well, it doesn't matter that I can play Mario and really enjoy it for 2 hours, because someone out there can beat it in 20 minutes. Like, I suck at this game. I'm the worst. Like,
exactly.
And then you start looking down on the joy maybe that you did experience, or the experience you had, when in reality, like, that is irrelevant.
And we would even take it further. And this is actually a good example, I think, because I think it does show the ridiculousness of the thinking, is to never play the game because you could never beat it in 10 minutes.
Exactly,
and just to say, well, I guess I can't beat it in 10 minutes, so I'm just not going to play. That's what we do. And that's just ridiculous, because the point of that game is to enjoy it however you want to enjoy it, whether that is speedrunning. And I hope I'm not coming across as critiquing speedrunners, because I think they love what they do. And that, to them, that level of success is their joy. So I wouldn't want to take that away from them. But then all the other levels of success that there could be, beating the game. There's some games that are legitimately hard, and if you just beat them, that's like a level of success that maybe you should be proud of.
No, but I think we've almost come full circle, because I think you really hit on something there. The reason you don't pick something up is because you don't know what you're after when you pick it up.
Yes,
like, here's what I mean.
Absolutely.
Because I'll never be as good as the best, I won't play this game. Well, what you've now done is you have assumed that the reason you would pick up that game is to be the best.
Yes.
Instead of, I'm just going to have a good time.
Yeah.
Or here's another perfect example. I play a fighting game, several fighting games that I really enjoy, video games. And fighting games are very competitive because it's player versus player, and it's like,
there's a ranking system normally.
Yep, there's ranking systems, and like you get pummeled, and it feels like you're literally getting pummeled, like that kind of a thing. And you can if you get matched against a player that's like so much better than you, it can be some of the most frustrating games you'll ever play. But one thing I've noticed, I actually picked this up from a YouTuber who only makes videos about fighting video games.
Yeah.
But he made a really insightful point. He said, if you start every fight and you just tell yourself, my goal is to learn and be a little better when I'm done with this. Even if you're getting your, butt kicked, like even if you're just getting demolished, you can actually take joy from that experience because you're like, I am watching greatness and I'm learning from it, and I'm figuring out even just a small percentage of growth. But what have I done? I have redefined why I'm playing the game. I have defined my desired future and my level of success. If I learned, I succeeded.
Yeah.
Right? If I grew, I succeeded. And so I think that's a perfect, we've sort of really come full circle, like, example of don't just assume, don't let the anchoring effect decide what your level of success is, or why you're doing something, or what your desired future is, or it can rob you of your joy, and it makes a strategy and thinking strategically basically impossible.
Yeah, it almost becomes a non-starter at that point. You're so anchored by the best or the stories you've heard that all the other levels of success that you could possibly have that might bring you joy, you're just taking them off the table.
Yeah.
And that's what I was going to say is, like, in video games, that sounds so ridiculous, to say what I just said. Nobody would say that. Like, everybody would say, just play the game to have fun. That's what games are designed for. But when you think about the fact, like, that's what your life is designed for, right?
Yes.
And yet we do the exact same thing. In fact, I think it's even more important with your life because you think about stuff like depression, anxiety, stress, like all of these other things. How much I've thought about this a lot. The older I get and the more my level of success is bounded, because the older you get, the more you realize, like, yeah, I'm not going to be like that great at this thing.
Yeah.
You start to run into your limits more, I feel like, the older you get. So the more that I am forcing myself to take joy in the things that are important to me, you know, where I'm like, yeah, I may never be the best in the world at that thing, but my family is great. Like my relationship with my wife is incredible. Not everybody can say that. I love my kids. Like I have great kids and they're well behaved and I don't hate them. Not everybody can say that. So there's a point where my happiness like starts to come from the things that I have good levels of success on and not necessarily bounding my life always by the things that I will never have, you know, crazy levels of success on. So I think that's hugely important, just for even your health, like in your life. But I think that's how life should be lived. Not that I want to tell people how to live their lives. It's more of a contentedness issue, right? Maybe even psychologically, like have happiness in your life instead of being frustrated that you can't be a 9 or a 10. Be happy with, you know, the 4s and the 5s that everybody else is just leaving, which is another thought in this whole thing is because people want to be the best in the world, sometimes there's less competition to not be the best.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. The thing you said there, I want to come back to it. I want to capture that thought you just said. Because people want to always be the best, often there's more room for like moderate levels of success. Is that a good way to restate that?
Absolutely.
Restate that?
Yeah, and I can actually give you an example of this. Again, I'm watching the NBA playoffs right now, which may date this episode, but this is why I'm thinking about it a lot, these illustrations. But Miami Heat, Duncan Robinson, he is a starter. And the reason he's a starter is because he's an amazing 3-point shooter. That's the only reason. And he could have abandoned that level of success and just said, well, I can't be LeBron James. I can't be Michael Jordan, so I'm not going to play basketball. But instead, he's taking like what you might consider a lower level of success. He's niching down in a sense, and going to be good at what he does and be happy with that. And that's hard to do. Right. But he's going to be more valuable to his team. He's going to have a better career overall. He's going to make more money even because he's getting really good at his thing and doubling down on that and being okay with that, you know?
So, okay, I want to hit something you said, and then maybe we can move into, or maybe there's a lot more to say on this, but maybe I do want to make sure we get to how do you choose and find your level of success? What kinds of things do you look at? But something you said earlier, you talked about, you know, you were saying being satisfied with the level of success you have or looking at other areas, that kind of thing. But I don't think what you're saying is settle, or maybe settle is the wrong word. Like the way you said it, and I don't think you meant it this way, but the way you said it felt kind of like stop wanting more and just be happy. And I think the way I might restate that, and I'm curious to hear you react to this because I thought you were making some great points there. I might restate it, and even the Duncan Robinson example, I might restate that to say it's not really about choosing less success. It's about getting more clear on what you want and making that your success.
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm saying.
So, for example, the example I gave about fighting a fighting video game or any game where you're getting really, you know, crushed and you're like, I redefine learning as my success, and then that becomes a successful game. It's not that I have said I will be happy with less success. I have redefined what the word success means in that context, and that's what gives me more joy. That's what gives me more happiness.
Yeah.
So we're not saying like, be happy that you're losing.
Yeah.
No, like, yeah, I wish I would win, but I can still find joy as I redefine what that success is. And then the question becomes, how can you personally define it in a way that gives you joy? Because maybe there's someone out there who they hear me tell that story of, you know, just learning from a loss. They're like, well, I would never be happy with that. Maybe that person exists. And if you're out there, that's fine. I'm different than you, and that's okay. So what is it for you? And then take that to any area of your life and say, how can you redefine success in that area? Again, not to keep the definition the same and just be happy with it. But to change the definition to something that still resonates with you, that still brings you joy. How does that hit you?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what I'm saying, is that I think because we anchor our thinking in the best in the world, because that's what we've been told, because we anchor our thinking in the stories we hear, which are always, again, the record breakers, the best in the world, the person who did something no one else had done, we tend to forget that what's probably more important is who we are and what will make us happy. That's what I was trying to get at is sometimes I don't know why. I do think this is a human condition thing. It's the grass is always greener, that type of thing where I'm looking at that one thing, and because I'm not the best at that, I'm like not happy instead of looking at what maybe I am really great at. And that's what I was going to say is it is really more about who you are and really getting clear on that. And I think we talked about that a lot in the last couple of sessions when we talked about destination, how important it is to know yourself, know your company, know who you are. There might be levels of success that are lower than the best in the world because of who you are, not because you're settling. Those are two different things, but because of who you are, right?
Yeah. And it's a choosing. Yes, it's a redefinition. I think you said that well. Like you redefine what you're or reframing. Your perspective changes. That's what helps you take that joy. Not like, oh, I went from wanting to win to now being okay with losing, right? It's different than that. So that's good.
So we should get into, and I think just to put a period on the end of this conversation, I think what is really, really bad is to vilify any level of success. I don't think really it's healthy to vilify the people that are the best in the world and they drive at it and they must have it and say, you should never compete like that. You shouldn't make that much money. You shouldn't, always be trying to beat everyone in your industry. Like, why? If that's who they are, I mean, obviously there are moral boundaries. I think, did we talk about that yet? I think we have.
We touched on it briefly, but there's a big section on that later.
Yeah, so later on, we're going to talk about like not crossing moral lines and how important that is. So I'm not saying that. I'm not saying like, step on everybody to get to where your goal is.
Like literally kill the person who's better than you.
Exactly. That's not what we're trying to say. But don't vilify people who are driven to be the best in the world at that thing because that's what they want. And don't vilify people who are okay not being the best and they're happy with their little slice, of success that they have. Like maybe their small business is only ever going to make $150,000 a year and they're happy with that. Like maybe they, because of that, they can travel 4 months out of the year and, get to spend time with their family and, fill in all the blanks. Like it's so dependent on who you are, and the things that are more important is like what's bringing you joy in your life, what's truly important to you, what resonates with your core, with who you are, your identity. We've talked a lot about that. That's what's important, not your level of success and us from the outside, this is what happens, us from the outside saying, well, if you don't have this level of success, then you're nothing.
Yes. Not your relative level of success. Relative. That's the phrase.
That's a great way of saying it. I like that. So I want to put a period on that. It does, like, their morals come into it only in so as how you're getting there, not the level. Like the level has nothing to do with the morality. The level has nothing to do with even your worth. I think that's an internal struggle. I know that's an internal struggle for me where I'm defining my own personal worth by the level of success that I, have achieved. And if I'm not achieving higher and higher levels of success, I think, oh man, like I think less of myself, right? Instead of being okay with maybe lower levels of success that line up more with who I am, right? So I think about this in fitness a lot. Like how many people are going to be like fitness models and athletes? Like not that many. Because that takes a certain level of commitment. It takes a certain number of hours in the gym. It takes certain diets that you have to live by. And I already know that I'm not like, I'm in this, health journey, but I already know that's not where I'm going. I'm not going to do that because I don't want to compete on the circuit. I don't care about that. But I can have lower levels of success in my physical life, my physical body, that I can be incredibly happy with, that make me feel good about myself. But if I'm only comparing myself to, people I find on Instagram and you know what I'm saying, then that can really I shoot myself in the foot with that.
Well, that's all for this episode. We hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to hear the rest of this conversation, make sure to subscribe so you get new episodes as they're released. You can also view this content along with visuals on our YouTube channel. The link is in the show notes. We'll see you on the next one.